America had won its independence. But winning a revolution was only the beginning. The new United States had a flag, a government, and 13 states. What it didn't have was a strong national system that could hold the country together. And within just a few years, that weakness was becoming impossible to ignore. The United States needed a new foundation, and in the summer of 1787, a group of American leaders gathered in Philadelphia to attempt something extraordinary. They would write a constitution for a brand new nation. After the Revolutionary War, America was governed under a system called the Articles of Confederation. The system gave most of the power to the individual states. The national government was intentionally weak. Congress could conduct diplomacy and manage certain national affairs, but it had serious limitations. It could not directly impose federal taxes. It struggled to raise money. And it had no strong executive branch to enforce national decisions. The young nation was already facing financial problems and political disagreements. America had won independence from Britain, but now another question remained. Could these 13 states actually survive as one country? By the 1780s, many American leaders believed the Articles of Confederation were not working well enough. One of the most important figures pushing for reform was James Madison of Virginia. Madison studied governments and believed the United States needed a stronger national framework while still protecting the rights and interests of the states. In 1787, delegates from the states were invited to meet in Philadelphia. The meeting became known as the Constitutional Convention. It was supposed to improve the existing system, but the delegates soon realized that small changes might not be enough. They were going to create something entirely new. In May 1787, delegates began gathering at the Pennsylvania State House in Philadelphia. Today, the building is known as Independence Hall. One of the most respected men in the room was George Washington. Washington had led the Continental Army during the Revolutionary War. Now he was chosen to preside over the convention. Another major figure was James Madison. Madison arrived prepared. He had studied the weaknesses of the existing government and had ideas about how the new system could work. Other influential delegates included Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, and many representatives from different states. But they did not all agree. In fact, some of the biggest arguments were still ahead. One of the most difficult questions was simple. How should the states be represented in Congress? The larger states wanted representation based on population. The smaller states feared that this would give the larger states too much power. The disagreement became intense. Eventually, the delegates reached what became known as the Great Compromise. The new Congress would have two chambers. The House of Representatives would be based on population. The Senate would give each state equal representation. It was not a perfect solution for everyone, but compromise was becoming the key to creating the new government. The delegates also faced another major question: who should have power? Instead of placing all national authority in one institution, the Constitution created three branches of government. The legislative branch would make laws, the executive branch would enforce them, and the judicial branch would interpret the law. This system created what Americans would later call checks and balances. The idea was simple. Power should not be concentrated in one place. Each branch would have important responsibilities, and each would have ways to limit the power of the others. After months of arguments, negotiations, and compromises, the delegates finally reached an agreement. On September 17, 1787, the Constitution was signed. Benjamin Franklin, one of the oldest delegates, reportedly reflected on the sun carved into the back of George Washington's chair. Was it a rising sun or a setting sun? After the Constitution was signed, Franklin believed he could finally see it as a rising sun, but the Constitution was not yet the law of the entire country. The states still had to approve it. The Constitution created a stronger federal government, but not everyone supported it. Some Americans feared that the new national government might become too powerful. Others believed the Constitution did not do enough to protect individual rights. Supporters of the Constitution became known as Federalists. Opponents were often called Anti-Federalists. The debate spread across the states. James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay defended the proposed Constitution in a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers. The country was debating not simply a document, but the future structure of the United States. Eventually, enough states ratified the Constitution. The new system of government was on its way, but the debate over individual rights did not disappear. To address concerns about government power, amendments were proposed. The first 10 amendments became known as the Bill of Rights. They were ratified in 1791. They protected important freedoms and established limits on government power: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the right to petition the government, and protections for people accused of crimes. The Bill of Rights became one of the most important parts of the American constitutional system. In 1789, the new government began operating under the Constitution. George Washington became the first president of the United States. The system created in Philadelphia was an experiment. No one could know exactly how it would develop. The Constitution would face wars, political crises, economic changes, and enormous social transformations. It would also be amended over time, but the basic framework created in 1787 survived. The United States had built a government based on a written constitution, divided powers, representation, and a system of checks and balances. The Founding Fathers did not create a perfect country. They argued, they disagreed, they compromised, and they left behind a document that would continue to be debated for generations. But in Philadelphia, in 1787, they accomplished something remarkable. They created a framework for a new nation, a framework that would shape American government for centuries. And even today, whenever Americans debate the power of government, individual rights, elections, or the meaning of freedom, they are still debating questions that began in that room in Philadelphia. The American experiment had begun, and the Constitution was at its center.